Welcome to Political Fixer Live. I'm your host, Shawna Presley Vercher, and it's going to be a great show this evening. We certainly have a lot of news to discuss. I don't know if anyone's been paying attention to the headlines, but if so, don't worry, it's a safe space. We've got some interesting takes on what's been happening in the market, what's been happening on the news. Let me run down what we're going to be covering this evening. All right, first story, our top story, the Political Fixer top trending story is the tariffs. And have I got a surprise for you? We've actually got the penguins in the studio that were taxed this week. I'm kidding, of course, because I'm laughing to stop from crying. But we do have a lot to discuss with what's actually happening with this tariff story. What are we in for with the economy? And how are you actually going to know the truth of what's going on? We're going to cover this story in a way that hopefully makes sense to everyone. And we've got some interesting side gossip that sadly might impact all of us with the stock market in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. All right, our second story has to do with a story that is a positive one, which is all of the protesting with the hands-off protests this last weekend. How did it go? Is it what we expected? And did it matter? We're going to talk about that. Does the protesting that's been done with hands-off and other things, is it something that made a difference, and what can we expect in the future? So we're definitely going to be talking about that, but spoiler alert, you guys crushed it, and there's some really positive things that we can take away from that. And then our third story is, in my opinion, a very underrated, underreported story. I understand there's a lot going on right now. We want to thank the Wisconsin voters for doing a great job in the Wisconsin election for the state Supreme Court seat there, where they defeated the attempt to buy a state Supreme Court seat by Elon Musk. But it turns out that we may have been paying attention to the wrong state Supreme Court seat. We're going to talk about a battle that has been brewing where there is an act to actively steal a state Supreme Court seat, what's happening, and even worse, how that movement to suppress votes, to discourage and dissuade people from being able to vote is now going on the roadshow. They're taking it national, folks. So there's some actual pending legislation that you need to be aware of and some current events you need to be aware of. Now, all of this is a lot to talk about, but we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our Political Fixer crew. Now, that includes, of course, our production team, which is Eddie, Sarah, and Jay Robot. They're with us tonight. But it also means all of you who have helped to make this show one of the top lives, the top TikTok live in its category. That's all thanks to you, an amazing group of people who gather in our Political Fixer community and not just provide really great feedback and questions to me during the show, but to each other. You are the top, most engaged audience on any live program in any category across our size of programming. So great job. And I see you're already off to an early start. We've already got 1.7 thousand likes. So let's dive in and let me earn those likes from you, okay? So let's talking about what's going on. Let's start with the tariff story. We're going to start with the tariff story, then we're going to go into the protests, and then we are going to cover what is happening in North Carolina, as well as some pending federal legislation and an executive order. All right? So, and we've got these people that are inviting themselves to try to co-host. I say thank you, no thank you. Okay. Let's start with this tariff story. So we all have been pretty much hearing tariff, even if it's against your will. Even if you are someone that doesn't normally follow the stock market, if you try to tune out business news and global economic news, good luck with that right now, because in case you have been trying to tune it out purposefully, and I do not blame you, there has been essentially massive tariffs, not terrorists, tariffs that have been placed across the board on nearly every country and location in existence. And I mean literally almost every bit of the planet, including Antarctica, where no humans exist except on traveling to naval bases and special missions. There's no Antarctic population aside from penguins. And then also in remote islands like the Heard and McDonald's Islands, which again, largely penguins, they also received a tariff, meaning that we are going to tax all of the goods that come in from those countries at sometimes a 10% rate, sometimes with the newest updates, if they are to believe What's being said right now with China, it will be a 104% tariff. Now, notably off the list, we should say, is Russia, but we're just going to cruise right past that and not speculate as to why. Okay, so there's a lot to take in here, but what should you prepare for? What can you believe? Is this really as bad as people say? We did a couple of videos that you can find on the Political Fixer channel. One of them explains kind of the tariff situation and how it works in real life, using the example of if you owned a small business, particularly a restaurant. If you're someone that doesn't follow economics a lot, you're not alone. It's not a subject that a lot of people grew up studying. And so if you don't really understand this stuff, that's totally understandable. We did a video about that. So you can find that a couple of videos back on Political Fixer. But essentially, businesses and a lot of employees, they don't have to study what's going on. They're already feeling the impact across the board with these tariffs already being announced and starting to go into implementation. We're starting to read about small businesses closing, businesses doing massive rounds of layoffs, and some of the larger expansion plans that had been planned by larger companies in key parts of the United States just being completely canceled. Why is this? This is a deep subject that we could go on about all night, but essentially, there's an idea that the reason we moved the tariffs, that we have the tariffs here to tax goods from other countries, is so that we would manufacture more things in America and grow our own economy here. The biggest problem with that, and there's several, is that we didn't really lead up to this in any way. So it's great to say that now we're going to make iPhones here. There's no iPhone factory here. We don't have it. So you can't build it overnight. What happens in the meantime? Oh, and by the way, if you wanted to build that factory, you would still need materials to actually build it, the raw materials that go into the iPhone. And we don't have a lot of that either. So a really great analogy I saw from a middle school teacher, she said, that's like saying you want to teach your kids not to eat out as much. So you say, I'm going to charge you $20 on your allowance if you order from, Uber Eats. But you also didn't stock the kitchen with any food. And oh, by the way, you locked the stove. So exactly how are they supposed to eat? Now, this has gotten a jolt of disruption in the stock markets, which is usually one of our indicators that there's problems with the market. Now, how does this play into politics and what we can expect? We've already seen that some Republicans are starting to get an earful, and that there are some members of Congress and some members of the Senate on both sides of the aisle that might actually take their power of the purse back and try to stand up and reverse some of these tariffs. Is that going to happen? Your guess is as good as mine. One would think it would have happened long ago, that they wouldn't have let it get to this point. So basically, we're watching Congress play a literal game of chicken to see how long they can let him take this tariff situation forward. So, what else is happening where we know that trouble is in paradise, that this might be something that fractures the party, that we might start to see some infighting and therefore some slowing down of this 2025 agenda? One thing is that we're seeing some fights at a high level from the different people in the administration. Most notably, we saw that Elon Musk said that the top trade advisor to 47, whose idea a lot of this was, his name is Peter Navarro, and we're going to be talking about him for a minute. This is largely Peter Navarro's idea. He is considered to be 47's top economic advisor, and he is very anti-free trade and very pro-tariff. Elon Musk is, as we know, a global businessman. All else aside, he likes making money. We know this to be true. And he cut right to the chase about what he thought about this. At first, he kind of soft-shooted, said he thought it was a terrible idea. He said he thought that we should have more free trade between the United States and the EU, and he would like to see no tariffs between the European Union and the United States, where he's trying to sell more Teslas. Then he went and got a little bit more firm on things, saying that Navarro, the economic advisor, is dumber than a sack of bricks. He later apologized and said that the comparison was unfair to bricks. So these insults, he's called him a moron. He said that he's an idiot, that he doesn't know what he's doing. So we know that there's problems, that this tanking of the stock market as it is right now, that this expansion of business costs across the board, that this is going to be something that causes more pressure on not just Republican Congresspeople, but the members of the cabinet. So let's take a step back. Who is Peter Navarro, and is he a genius that's going to ultimately boom the American economy, and we are just going to have to take short-term pain? And why is 47 continuing to listen to him even when the stock market is tanking? Well, if you don't know who Peter Navarro is, but the name sounds vaguely familiar, then you might realize that if you did a little digging in your memory bank there, that he's actually associated with the insurrection of January 6th. And he was subpoenaed by the House Ethics Committee that was looking into the insurrection to come testify in his alleged role of organizing the January 6th insurrection. To show his loyalty to 47, he defied that congressional subpoena and actually went to prison. For 4 months, he served in federal prison. And then hours after he was released in July, he took the stage at the Republican National Convention. So this is a guy whose loyalty is very clear. He has made no bones about the fact that he is on the red team, and that loyalty has been rewarded. Right now, okay, fine. He's a loyal guy, but is he an expert? Is he a genius? And we just don't know it. And maybe we're biased because we don't like this administration. Well, you tell me. He was discovered when Jared Kushner allegedly, according to the stories that come from this administration, when they were looking for an economic advisor, and Jared Kushner was doing a search on Amazon for books written by economists. And he came across this book called Death by China. And it was written by Peter Navarro. Now, he's also written a half a dozen other books. And in it, he talks about this need to tariff yourself out of a situation where you are dealing with those pesky other countries and their goods, and to bring everything back home. And it's not just him that feels this way. In all of his books, and there's been about half a dozen of them, then he cites a very emphatic source that backs up everything he's saying. Navarro quotes the source Ron Vara, V-A-R-A. And that economic source, that economic advisor, offers testimonials and graphs and expert advice to show how accurate Navarro's assessments are. There's only one tiny problem, and that is that Ron Vara doesn't exist at all. Ron Vara is an anagram of Navarro. So this guy's not just possibly not an expert on absolutely anything, but honestly might not even be all there. Like, has his own Harvey the Rabbit who is advising him in his ear. Okay, that is who's driving the economy right now. Problematic, to say the least. Okay, now some of you already are aware of the fact that Ron Vara is Navarro. Yeah, Nursey Powell says this is beyond nuts. Oh my goodness, yes. Right, just when you think it can't get loonier, it does, okay? We all know that, well, a lot of us know that Trump used to do something very similar. I cannot remember his pen name, but some of you will remember. He would write letters into things like the National Enquirer and the Style magazines and things like that, and use a fake name to say that Donald Trump is a really great guy, right? Okay. So, Barron, is that what it is? All right, now we're going to keep going with this story. There's one other thing that I want to tell you that is actually useful besides just idle gossip and holy moly, what ride are we strapped in for? First, I want to thank Danette, Bird, Sheen Learily, so many other people that are sharing gifts. I want to thank you so much. Professor Liberty Esquire, one of our favorite Political Fixer family members, is here. So is Candace, one of our Political Fixer team members. So everybody say hi to Candace. She's online as well. So we've got so many people that are making this show possible. We're already at over 8,000 likes. Let's keep going with this story because there's more to talk about here. All right, let me tell you what to expect. So we have an understanding sort of kind of what's going on, which is they made a list They allegedly got this list by plugging stuff into ChatGPT with a very basic formula, misunderstanding some very basic principles of economics. But no matter how we got here, we're here. So what can we expect? Is it going to get better? Is he going to be able to cut these deals with these other countries and make our economy even stronger? I don't pretend to be an economics expert. I will say, if I was looking for economic expertise, I wouldn't tend to go to the guy that bankrupted 6 businesses, including a casino, and has 34 felonies. But that's me. You can choose to get advice from whoever you like. It is, for now, a free country. So I'm trying to look at what's already happening rather than drive myself nuts for what might happen. Now, to do that, a lot of people are saying that, look at the stock market. The stock market is tanking. That is true, but it's only one economic indicator. So I want to offer a quick word of caution on following that little ticker and that little graph. And then I also want to tell you what I would look for if you're looking at a very easy, simple way of where are we as a country. Tune out the noise, tune out the spin. What is a basic way that you as a person can just look at this, take a deep breath, and see where we are as you're making decisions for yourself about a job or retirement, or whether or not to make a big purchase or sell your house. Let me just try to give you what I would use based on some information that I received from a president of Bank of America. So we're going to get to that in just a second. Let me just caution you, though, that and the Bank of America president would also say this, and did share this when I had the opportunity to discuss the economy with he and also a Florida president of Wells Fargo at a conference that I attended for leadership, asking questions about exactly this. This was way back in the summer and this hadn't hit yet, but the idea was, if the election went a certain way, how would we know if there was a problem with the economy or not, right? Because a lot of people tried to say under President Biden that the economy was in turmoil when in fact it was not. So how do you know what to believe was the question I asked. And I'm going to share the answer in just a second. The first part of that answer is, don't always trust the stock market. Why not? Well, first of all, bigger companies can adjust and adapt. They sometimes have stockpiles of inventory. They can move capital around. Sometimes they've planned for these things, and they can make a lot more mistakes with a lot more money than regular people can. So just looking at the stock market is usually not enough of an indicator. The other thing to keep in mind is the stock market is kind of an interesting beast. It wants to heal itself. That is the nature of the stock market. And we saw a glimpse of that this week when something, again, every time you think it can't get crazier, it does, something absolutely insane happened. How badly does the stock market, as if we're going to treat it like a living being for a second, how badly does it want things to be better? Well, let me tell you something that happened this week in the stock market. The stock market has been tanking, plummeting. These are not my words. These are the words from places like the Wall Street Journal, CNBC. As these things started to tank, as we were watching a wall of downward spiral happen, then for a moment earlier this week, there was an uptick. And suddenly, within a matter of minutes, the market picked up by 8%. And then it went right back down again. What was the cause of this? Why did this tick up? Now, this is absolutely 100% sourced. This is the timeline of events that I'm going to tell you. Okay, at 10:11 a.m., there was a tweet from an account called Hammer Capital. And this account, if anyone had bothered to check, has less than 1,000 followers. And the handle of this Hammer Capital account is Your Favorito. Again, I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, but there were some clues here, guys. And this account said that the administration is, quote, considering a 90-day pause in tariffs, that they're going to decide if they're going to pause the tariffs for 90 days. That happened at 10:11 a.m. At 10:12 a.m., CNN was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and cheers were breaking out because that tweet had been retweeted by someone named Walter Bloomberg, who has a verified check mark, but absolutely zero relationship to Bloomberg News, the Bloomberg family, Michael Bloomberg, or anyone of Bloomberg import. No one. But he tweeted it from a handle called Delta One. saying with siren emoji breaking, the administration is considering a 90-day pause in tariffs. By 10:15, 4 minutes after the original tweet was posted, then CNBC anchors read it on air as fact. And they said, apparently, Hassett's been saying that he'll consider a 90-day pause in tariffs. Read this into the record on the air as if it was fact. And by 10:19, we are 8 minutes into this fake tweet. By 10:19, then Reuters, a real news source, allegedly, was then reporting the same headline and citing CNBC as the source. It was a living, breathing game of telephone, and it moved the market by 8%. By the time that someone realized that this was fake and had reached out to the White House for comment, it was 12:28, over 2 hours later, and by then the market tried to take a dip. Okay, why does this happen? First of all, if you ever want a study, like a case study on the race to be the one to break the story rather than the one to actually deliver good journalism, good Lord, is this it? But the second thing with this is they want it to be true. They want it to be true. They don't want to lose a lot of money. They don't want their businesses to fail. They don't want to lose their retirement savings. They don't want to have angry clients calling their financial planning offices, right? They want it to be true. And so therefore, you have to just understand that over time, the stock market may start to correct. But that doesn't, I love what Puma Father is saying, emotional finance. So true. So true. Okay, so here's the thing. Then what do you believe, right? I'm not saying ignore the stock market. I mean, even if you don't have, many stocks, I'm not saying that everyone has those. Is your pension tied up in it? Do you have any savings? Do you work for a company that the livelihood is tied up in the stock market somehow? For a lot of people, that's true. Even people you might not realize, like firefighters and police officers, a lot of times their pensions are partially invested in the stock market, right? So a lot of us are tied to the stock market, whether we realize it or not, even if you don't have a stock portfolio. That being said, while we want the stock market to recover, we want to have a healthy economy, how do we know what's true and what is just smoke and mirrors? Well, that's what I asked the president of Bank of America this summer, and I had the opportunity to get an answer for all of you just out of coincidence. Was hoping I'd never need it, but here we go. So the short answer is that when you want to know how the economy is doing for everyday people, you need to look at whether or not people are experiencing everyday problems and everyday pain. The first thing that the Bank of America president says that they look at, and this is not sponsored, and to be very clear, I'm kind of anti-Bank of America, but here's the thing. These people, they like to make money. It's their job to try to predict this stuff. So while I'm not necessarily cozy with big corporate banks, never really have been, we try to bank local whenever possible, I do trust that they are good at trying to understand money. Right? That's one thing that I do trust. So I want to be clear where we stand here, that this is not a, oh, yay, big corporate banks. This is, if I want to know about money, I go to the people that have the money, right? And I ask them the questions. So, okay, so we're looking for everyday problems. The first thing they said that they check on is credit card purchases. Now, you and I won't have access to that data, but if you've ever wondered what banks look at, when they own a bunch of credit cards and they're taking this collective data, if they see that people are charging things like groceries, that starts to set off an alarm bell. If they see that people are running up credit card debt because of exotic, fancy clothes or an exotic vacation, they're okay with that because those are luxury good items and they feel like people feel comfortable, right? They feel like people are okay making these purchases, so they keep an eye on what is being purchased. Data that's publicly available to us is how many people start getting late on those credit cards, can't make that minimum payment, start to run up their base level of credit. That is a negative economic indicator, and any of us that have credit cards can relate to that. So we're looking for measurements of how many people start to get late with their credit card payments. The next one, you could probably guess. If you've got to pay something late, what's the next big thing you're going to pay late? Your car. And there are a number of nonprofit and trusted federal sources that will tell us are people starting to pay their car notes late? Right? So this is something that we can keep an eye on. And by the way, that number is starting to spike. People are starting to make their car payments late. It's something that you think maybe you could just catch up the next month. It's the first big thing that people tend to start to juggle. And then I bet you can guess what the third one is. The third thing is, are you starting to get late on your mortgage? So looking at how many mortgages and rents are late is the next economic indicator, because you're going to do everything you can to pay that rent or that mortgage on time. And by that next time soon, you're going to have people that are starting to get into repossessions and foreclosures. And that takes us right back to some of the other economic disasters of our past. So right now, we are looking at the stock market. Where do we look to see if regular people are hurting? You're going to look at everyday economic indicators. And a lot of that kind of stuff you can find online for free. We're going to be looking for ways we can bring that to you as well. So are we in for a rough ride? I'm not an economist, I can't say, but logically, it feels like monkeys have broken into the circus train and they're the ones driving. If I'm just going on my own vibes instead of stock market vibes. But do I hope that that's not the case? How many of you are going to lose jobs? How many of us are going to lose clients? How much more expensive are things about to get? We're about to find out together. But if you're looking to see if that pain is collective or if it's just in your area, hopefully this information helps you just a little bit so that you can kind of feel out where we are going. All right. Okay. So we are already at over 18,000 likes. This is a tough story. And I'll tell you why. First of all, it's scary. Second of all, it's huge. We're talking about global economies. Third, we're not all experts on this stuff. And even if you are, it's just like anything else. You get two people in a room that say they're experts, they're going to say different things, usually with big fancy acronyms and words we've never heard of. It's understandable that this stuff is not easy to wrap our minds around. But that's why these moments of clarity, like he taxed the penguins, make us know that not exactly geniuses are in charge. All right, let's talk about who's ultimately showing themselves to be in charge. And our second story for this evening is about the hands-off protests. And that is all of you. You all definitely outdid yourselves this last Saturday, April 5th. I would like to think that was a birthday present all about me. Just kidding. But you did actually go out there and make some noise. There were over 1,000 different locations, large and small. And the ones that were large were ginormous. For example, in downtown New York City, over 100,000 estimated people showed up. Now, these hands-off protests attracted a number of different people upset about a number of different things. Some of them about reproductive health, voting rights, Doge and the government, about the guy that's in the Oval right now, about human rights and the immigration law, about the anti-woke racism, about destroying our government systems, about tanking the economy, though that was a fairly late development. The paint was still wet on those signs. But whether it was someplace really large like New York City, or whether it was in some of the smaller towns like Petoskey, Michigan, then you showed up. And even in some places where only there are a few thousand citizens and are largely red areas, still hundreds and hundreds of you showed up, right? There's so many reasons to be upset right now, but let's talk about the positives. Why were people protesting and did it matter? That's the question. The number one question that I'm getting right now is, did the hands-off protests matter? Did it actually mean anything that all of these people showed up? And the answer is absolutely yes. I'm going to give you 3 small ways and one really big one why these hands-off protests and other acts of civil disobedience actually do matter. Let's start with the easy one. When you show up because you're upset about something or something is bothering you, and there's millions of other people across the country that are showing up in the same way, then suddenly you're not based in fear. Suddenly you don't feel alone. Suddenly you've found your people. You are starting to build a collective community. And just like fear is contagious, as Kamala Harris recently said in a speech, so is courage. So having other people physically show up definitely made a lot of people feel less alone. But the second thing is that this story traveled to other parts of the planet, and other countries have been looking at the United States. Let's use Greenland as a fun example, and wondering if we have lost our minds. So, seeing so many people rise up and speak out sent a message around the globe that we're not all like this, that we don't all believe the things that this administration believes. And that strengthened a friendship to a lot of people around the world that have been paying attention to America and to Americans. The third thing that you managed to do is you changed a media cycle. Every news story and every publication on Sunday through Monday was pretty much, even with the tariff story, one of the top stories was the hands-off protests. That is not easy to do, to change an entire media cycle and to show that not everyone agrees with this administration. Keep in mind that legacy media makes a lot more money when chaos is on the table. So they like it when he's in office. So for them to report that we're not happy is a big deal. But the biggest thing I want to talk to you about is the 3.5% rule. There's a Harvard study and this study has been reproduced in a number of different ways, looking at historical context from a number of different countries, including our own. And it says that if you can get 3.5% of a population to participate in civil disobedience, then no regime, even with the strength of the military, even with a tyrant in charge, even if it's been deeply rooted for several years, no regime can withstand 3.5% of its citizens being actively engaged. So some back of the napkin math for you on that. We have about 260 million adults in the United States. 3.5% of that is around 10-ish million people. Well, you know what? 5.2 million of you already showed up. And unfortunately, we're just getting started. Now, here's the thing. What can we expect in the future? In the near future, they are planning another hands-off protest. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it is April 19th. And I got a reliable website for you, which is 5050.1, spelled out, right? I see that someone else is saying generalstrikeus.com is another thing, right? There's a lot of websites that are out there. One that I've been using to look up events in my area is 5050.1. Spelled out, the word 50.one. All right. So they are planning more things immediately on April 19th. Here's the thing. We're very early in. We're not even 6 months in to this presidency. And unfortunately, one way or another, things are probably going to get worse before they get better. We had over 5 million people upset then. So we need to encourage people to stick together, to continue to build community, and to move forward together with civil disobedience. All right. Love to Dance brings up, why would protesting be considered civil disobedience? Isn't that our constitutional right? It's a great question. But I guess that technically when you're talking about civil disobedience, you're saying, like, I'm not going along with what you're saying. I'm not buying into the way you want to do things. So it's not civil disobedience like you're breaking the law. I mean, as far as I know, the protests were extremely friendly. In fact, police officers were quoted as saying how shocked they were that there wasn't violence and, stealing of things, and that we aren't the boogeymen that we've been portrayed to be, that this was actually very friendly, collaborative protesting. But it's the idea of speaking out against leadership. And while in democracy, it is supposedly our right, at the same time, if you are someone who is a tyrant, who is a fan of fascism, who is an authoritarian, then to speak out against that type of leadership is considered to be disobedience. But it's a great point and a great question. Carol C says, no one broke into the Capitol. So true. It's amazing how that happened, right? I want to say hi to Kelly Frazier, who, yes, John Barron was the fake name. I know I saw many of you that had that he used whenever he was writing into the tabloids back in the earlier days. Hi to Kelly Frazier, hi to Cynthia Fontaine, and so many, Stephanie, Wendy R, Chinny to Walker, forgive me if I'm missaying that. So many other people that are saying hello and supportive of the show. Listen, this is something that I just want to wrap this up on the protest side, right? You're asking about the insurrection law. Let's talk about that in just a bit. Um, let's say a couple of things about this. First of all, going out in a crowd and protesting might not be your flavor of civil disobedience, and that's okay. That is totally okay. It doesn't mean that you either show up to this or nothing. Sometimes, depending on what town you live in, wearing a t-shirt can be an act of civil disobedience. Creating content online that educates people about what's really going on, that is civil disobedience. Talking to people in your community about what's happening with Doge and Social Security and the veterans and getting them to understand the truth about this administration, that can be a form of civil disobedience. Okay, so it's not civil disobedience is only protests. Civil disobedience is only when you have something very large that's very orchestrated and organized, right? That is not necessarily the case. It's however you are standing up to a tyrant. You right? How are you standing up to the bad guys in your own ways, large and small? And there are so many ways that we can do that, but we don't all know each other's private situations, how secure we feel, where we live, what our relationship or business status is. So, however you find a way to stick up for yourself and stick up for others, that still counts. So I'm convinced that we're well past that 5.2 million number. And again, unfortunately, I think we're just getting started. But, oh, Skyscraper says, speaking up at a town hall, such an important thing. Yes, writing a letter to an editor, publishing something on some sort of blog or website, right? These are all really great opportunities for you to speak up and get involved and be civilly disobedient in your own way. You know, I think in this situation, being there for each other is going to be important. And what you do about a cause that impacts you is going to be so critical right now. But I would argue gently that what you do on behalf of other people is going to be more important because there are groups, and we could spend all night talking about the groups that are being picked on right now: the immigrant community, the trans community, teachers, seniors, that especially those that need different medical care and Meals on Wheels and things. Like, there are so many people that are about to be picked on. How are we speaking up on behalf of them as well, right? And you know, not everyone can do a protest. Not everyone feels like they're safe in that area. Not everyone, that's just not your style for some people, and that's okay. Find your way of causing good trouble. Use that inspiration that Senator Cory Booker provided us with his 25-hour marathon speech on the floor. Find yourself that good trouble. Find your way of doing it, right? Okay, veterans, another one. Robin Prince, good one. They're another group that's being picked on right now. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's keep going with our next story. If for those of you just joining us, welcome to Political Fixer Live. I'm Shawna Presley Vercher. We're so happy that you're here with us tonight. We are going to talk about a couple of other stories. Want to make sure that you know that in our chat we have a very supportive group of people. You can see us tonight on TikTok and on YouTube, and then at any time after this broadcast, then you'll also be able to find us on the Political Fixer channel of YouTube. You'll be able to find the whole episode. So you can grab a clip or grab a part that you think you want to share with friends, and it's readily accessible for anyone who wants to go ahead and grab any information. I also heavily encourage you to take pieces of this, jot down any piece that you find resonates with you, and create your own content. We do a lot of research here. We try to find stories in a way that's kind of creative, that hopefully makes sense to people, that provides a new perspective. And if something resonates with you, go create that content. That's what we want to have happen. We're hoping that we do something that helps to amplify your view and your questions you have for us, and that we make you feel more confident to go out there and amplify and raise your own fearless voices, because that's what we're going to need. So it doesn't matter if you are someone that is a political expert or not. If you find something useful here, take it. Cheat off of my test. Go for it. Make it your own, because us getting the information out there is the entire goal. Okay, Puck, thank you so much for sending all the lovely gifts. Veronica, so many of you sending the gifts. Let me answer this insurrection question, and then we'll move on to our next story. So there are machinations being in place, and 47 has said that he would like to invoke what's known as the Insurrection Act, which many of us were expecting would come, having to do with employing the military as well as state and national guard, that kind of thing, to try to shut down anything that he considers to be a threat to the United States government, which we all know means anyone that disagrees with him, right? We know that to be the case. Right now, he is saying that he wants to invoke this. There are people looking into the feasibility of that. What I will tell you is this: many of even the Republican governors in the very red states have been pushing back against this. Now, am I expecting them to stand up for us and save the day? No. But there is a huge pushback on this because, first of all, it's extremely expensive, and we do not trust this man to pay his bills, even though it's using our tax dollars. But also, it creates chaos, an environment of fear, and the fear is that it would cause an environment of perpetual violence. Now, while that might be something he enjoys from his tower watching, his television while eating a bunch of French fries, that's not something that most people who actually govern would like to see. So we're going to see a resistance of that and see it get challenged in a number of ways. I don't know what's going to happen, but something like that is a tough ask, even when everything's going well. I'm not a student of history, but I'm trying to get caught up. I've joked before that if it didn't happen near the Alamo, I'm not aware of it because I was very rooted in Texas history growing up. I had to catch up on the world history side. But here's something that I do know. When you're talking about authoritarian and regimes and tyrants and things like that, let's use common sense for just a second. A really good way to not have the military do something they don't want to do in the first place, like hit grandma while she's at a protest holding a poster board? Attack veterans, attack the military, remove their care, make them less loyal to you. If there's anything that he's doing right now, which is a complete blunder, and thank goodness for it, if you're worried about who the military is going to listen to, their conscience versus that guy, right now, the way he's going, he looks like an idiot. They all do. And that's actually very helpful for us. He's also betraying an oath and a promise that he made to strengthen the military and the veterans and to not remove their care. And when you're firing hundreds of thousands of veterans and wrecking the VA, it's not going to inspire a lot of loyalty, right? So I would just say, let's take it one step at a time and realize that while they, in my opinion, again, this man, in my opinion, embodies all 7 of the deadly sins. I have not a kind word to say to him, about him or to him, but the saving grace is he's also an idiot. So let's never forget that in the scheme of things and realize that might be ultimately what saves us. Okay, that in mind, not taking anything for granted. We talked a lot about the Wisconsin State Supreme Court seat, that election that Elon Musk tried to buy. It was the most expensive judicial race in United States history. And he was spending, Elon Musk, over $25 million just on his own to try to buy that state Supreme Court seat, in my opinion, because Tesla has a pending court case coming up in Wisconsin to get more dealerships. Sometimes the simplest answer is the answer. There is another story we need to focus on, which is happening in North Carolina, and this has widespread impact in a different way. I want to discuss what is happening in Wisconsin. In November, among a list of other elections that, of course, happened in November of 2024, one of them is a Supreme Court seat for the state of North Carolina. Now, Allison Riggs was the winner of that election. It was a close election. I believe 754 votes is what separated it. But we know that Justice Riggs won this election, right? How do we know? Because not only did they count the ballots, they recounted the ballots. They did a hand count of the ballots, and they said the same thing. She won by over 700 votes. It was a close win, but that in and of itself is not illegal. Well, her opponent refused to concede. And his last name is Griffin. And her Republican opponent refused to concede, and he refused to let them certify the election. And he said that there was fraud. Now, at first, he said that there were 224,000 illegal ballots that had been cast by people who were non-citizens or not eligible to vote. He lost that case, and then he said, just kidding, it's 65,000. 65,000 votes should not count, and here's why. Well, he lost at every step until a couple of his literal colleagues on the appellate court of the state of North Carolina overruled all of the local findings and all of the evidence and said, you know what? We're going to take you at your word here. We are going to say that 60,000 of these votes need to be cured. We need to verify that someone actually voted. And if you cannot find the person who cast this ballot and get additional confirmation, we're going to throw them out. We're going to throw them out. All right, let's take this story a piece at a time because there's a chunk to this that we really got to pay attention to. To be very clear, this is bigger than a state Supreme Court race. It is, of course, right versus wrong, fair versus ironically named rigged. But at the same time, this is a test balloon. This is them trying a new way to steal elections. Now let's play devil's advocate for just a second. How do we know that these votes actually are real, that they are valid? Why does the devil need an advocate? Let's continue anyway. All right, so out of the votes that they're looking at, this 60,000 votes, Judge Griffin, who is saying that he actually would have won this if it was fair, right? How many people has he already found that cast their vote illegally? Because if you've got a worm in one apple, you got to check them all, right? The answer is zero. The answer is zero. There are zero illegal votes that they have found at all. So that is alarm bell number one, that you can just say this and it puts everything on pause. Keep in mind, this woman won her election in November. It is now April, and she's still fighting this in court, right? She's still fighting for this seat. So he's already stolen something no matter how this plays out, right? And he has zero legal factual basis for this. So that's alarm bell one. Alarm bell two. How did they decide the 60,000 people? How did they decide which votes they were going to look at? Well, one of the things they said is there were votes where people didn't show an ID. Oh, okay, well, that's important. You want to follow the law and show an ID. There was no law making these people show an ID. These are people that are voting from overseas, largely in the military or military families, that register a different way. They use a military platform. And as part of that registration, they already have to provide their military documentation and their social security number in order to vote. They already followed the law. What he wanted them to do was also take a photo of their photo ID and submit it with the vote. That's a great idea, man. Talk about that all day long. It's not the law. It's not the rule. They've already started trying to chase these ballots down. There's a young woman named Mrs. Conley, and she saw on Instagram what was happening in North Carolina. She's like, I'm from North Carolina. Now, she is a military overseas voter. She is currently stationed in Italy because her husband is serving in the U.S. Army. So not only are we messing with people who are Americans, we are once again picking on the military. So she sees this on Instagram and they say, hey, click here and see if you're one of the ones that's vote is in danger here. And sure enough, it was. Now, Mrs. Conley grew up in North Carolina. Shouldn't matter. But just to be clear, she has been registered to vote in Guilford County her entire adult life. Her entire adult life. This is not even complicated. This isn't a woman that skips from state to state, though that's her right to do so. This is a woman who is serving her country as a military spouse with her husband in active duty in our army, whose vote has been thrown out. All right. And so she went through the State Board of Elections and she said that, this is her quote, I would be okay if he was trying to amend the law for future elections. If you tell me that I need to provide an ID, I'm happy to do that. But they didn't tell me I needed to do it. I hate to use the word steal, but it seems like this is a person who is bitter and they lost and they're trying to change the rules. Yes, That is 100% what's happening, right? That is 100% what's happening. This guy lost. He figured out a way with a bunch of other minions to delay the process of certification. Now he's making up and fabricating this idea of illegal votes, and he is using that as a way to try to steal this race. Now, the state Supreme Court just today in North Carolina put a pause on this throwing out or needing to cure of the 60,000 votes. They put a pause on it. We still don't know how it's going to go. And if you're not following this story yet, please pay attention to it because it impacts everything, right? Texas Leftist is asking, tossing out ballots is a big problem. What is the legal recourse? And the answer to that is, depending on your state, we don't know if there is one. But in general practice, following these processes, following these smaller races until they're certified. Let me back up. What do most of us do? If we vote, which thankfully I'm sure a lot of you do because you've gotten involved in the process over the last several years, some of you for longer than I have, right? Whether you're new to the table or whether you're someone that's been in politics for years or you're someone that just considers it your patriotic duty to vote, what do we normally do? We follow the election results. We check the races we care about for reasons that directly impact us or emotional reasons, right? And then we turn off the news or we throw away the newspaper and we look away. Well, one thing to answer Texas leftist problem is we need to start paying attention until they're certified. We need to start following this through and seeing, anytime you see a headline like something is being challenged, a close race, opponent doesn't concede. Anytime there's a close race like that, unfortunately, that's on us to pay attention. And a lot of times what these rulings are is that your ballot needs to be cured, meaning they need to reach you. And then you say, yes, it's me. Here's my ID. Please count my ballot, right? If you want to go extra steps and you want to go extra credit besides doing that, think about the people in your life that maybe aren't as plugged in, aren't as online. Maybe you have some senior citizens in your life or some people that aren't as technology savvy, right? You might want to check for their names as well, right? And make sure about that type of thing, right? You can also, if you would like, you could also start volunteering for some of these curing processes, which means that you get a list of names and you start knocking on doors and trying to reach the people that cast those ballots, right? That's something that can be done as well. And when they have funds that try to, because this has happened in other states, not to this extent, but this has happened, you can also donate to those causes for the different parties that are trying to defend their position, right? So this is the beginning of this. I wish I could say this was an outlier. It's not. We know this. This is a test balloon. Now, I told you earlier that I know for a fact that he's lying. How do I know that what's happening in North Carolina with the Supreme Court race is, in fact, just an attempt to steal this election and not actually caring or suspecting that there are illegal votes? The reason I know is because all liars have a tell, and there is a tell with these types of situations. Let's suppose, for sake of discussion, that the North Carolina Republican Party genuinely thinks that 60 to 65,000 votes were cast illegally. Then surely they're looking into other races, right? Surely they're looking just as deeply at the races that they won by a close margin as the ones that they lost by a close margin. Surely they're talking about a number of different elections that were close that night, not just this one. How many people actually vote on just a state Supreme Court seat? No one. But guess what? They're not looking into any of these races. The North Carolina Observer newspaper asked a question to this exact appellate board that said that these votes were now in danger. Hey, why aren't you looking at any of the other races that were close if you're worried there were illegal votes cast? And his quote was, "There's no use in opening the barn door once it's shut." This is a judge. And his question to a constitutional issue of voter integrity was, there's no use in opening the barn door once it's shut. Presumably quoting the Supreme Court case of Yosemite versus Sam. I don't want your homespun, well, gosh, gee willikers justification for stealing this race. The bottom line is they're only looking at the one race that they lost by a close margin, because this isn't about the legitimacy of the votes. This is about sore losers using the American people as a shield and depriving us of our right to vote, particularly those in the military, and it's disgusting. So don't let them shield it in anything else besides greed and craven power. That's all this is. That's all this is. The problem is they're just getting started. This isn't just a North Carolina problem. How many of you have been following the SAVE Act, right? How many of you have been following the SAVE Act? If you haven't been, I'm about to give you something else to worry about, and I apologize for that, but it will be worth it because there's still a way to fight this, all right? You guys are giving me such kindness tonight. So many gifts, so much support. We're already at 50,000 likes here, and I'm about to wreck your evening with another nightmare, but I promise you we will get to the silver lining by the end of it, but you gotta know what's happening. All right, there's two very dangerous things that are happening at the same time. The SAVE Act is currently in the House. We're expecting a vote anytime. Spoiler alert, the House is cray-cray. I'm expecting it to pass. So we're really concentrating on what happens when it gets to the Senate. That is our opportunity to look at things. I'm going to explain what it is, why you should care, and what we can do. All right? The SAVE Act, ironically, they always name these backwards just to mess with your mind. Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. That is what it's called. All right? Now, on its surface, seems harmless enough. Just seems like it would be an inconvenience, which is they want to root out fraud, which means that one of the things that's in the bill is that you have to register to vote in person. Okay? An inconvenience to say the least for most of us. I don't know if any of you have ever been at a DMV, but imagine that times 1,000 every time you want to change your voter ID or switch your party registration, not being able to do that online. Lots of fun. Also somewhat of a very difficult task for those that are differently abled, live in a rural area, or don't live close to an area where you can change it, or can't take off of work in the middle of the day to do so. So huge inconvenience. It gets worse. It also states, its language says that you have to establish documentation and proof that you are a citizen. Doesn't really get much more specific than that. Says you have to prove that you're a citizen. Now, how do you prove that? They're suggesting things like the real ID. If any of you have been reading about real IDs, you know, if any of you travel by airport recently, there's signs up that say that you need to get real IDs. Well, the law doesn't say that real IDs would work, but okay, another inconvenience. I've got to pay for another ID. Forget the people that it discriminates against, that this is an expense they can't afford. Forget the fact that most people haven't been told this and they'll find out when it's too late and it's actually time to vote. Forget all of that for a second. There's a bigger problem, which is that the real ID doesn't actually list your citizenship status on it. And in fact, non-citizens are eligible to get a real ID. So that won't work, will it? They also said military IDs. Same thing, military IDs do not say you're a citizen, and we have a number of people who are immigrants to this country who serve in the military, and it doesn't verify your citizenship status on your military ID. Now, there's some mention of birth certificates. Slight scenario here for you. Let me grab a number here, which is, I want to get this data accurate. 21 million, an average of 21 million American citizen adults do not have ready access to their birth certificate or some other form of citizenship verification. Out of those, nearly 4 million don't have an ability to get it at all. I remember this with my husband's late grandfather. The village or town that he grew up in the parish in Louisiana, they didn't have those records anymore. That thing did not exist. We tried to get it as like a sentimental gift one time for the holidays. Didn't exist. Could not get it, right? So fine, 4 million people, they can't vote. Still might not have your attention. Let me present this scenario. The bill specifically says that the information on your birth certificate, if that is used to verify citizenship, must match your current ID. Is there any reason why people might have a different name on their current ID that is perfectly legal that does not match their birth certificate? It might not match your social security card. It might, right? Like, all right. So what are they going to do about this? What are they going to do to make this issue go away? They're saying that each state is supposed to set up their own organization and their own rules and their own processes to figure it out. So they've said, here is the problem. You go solve it. Awesome. That's not going to be extremely inconvenient and very confusing. Some states are already saying that they don't have the bandwidth to do this. They're losing funding left and right. They cannot possibly set up an entire division that is there to compare my birth certificate from Texas City, Texas, if I can find one, to my marriage certificate, to my current ID, etc., right? Now, some of you are asking, what about a passport? Yes, a passport could probably work. Most Americans don't have a passport. Most Americans don't have one. And if you're looking at getting one or you're looking at getting one renewed, I would do it now, because every government department, including the Department of State, including the department that processes those passports, is about to be, if it has not been already, eviscerated. Oh, wait, another fun thing for you, as if this doesn't get worse. There's an executive order that goes on top of all of this. So you've got the SAVE Act, right? And it's got this, I don't know how we're going to do it. Just do it. Awesome. There's an executive order that goes on top of this, which is that they would like for, after the states have set up their processes, after they think they have verified voters, after they have proven that we are citizens, that there's a department that they would like to have all of the voter data sets sent to review and root out fraud. Spoiler alert, it's the same department that's been rooting out fraud in the other departments of our government as well. That's right, DOJ. He wants DOJ to get all of our voter data, and then they pull out ones that they think smell bad, aren't authentic. So you could do all of this. You could have your passport, you could have your marriage license, you could have your first kindergarten report card, all of these things ready to go, right? A photo of you in your hospital bed in the middle of America, right? As a citizen holding a US flag on day one of your birth. Does not matter. That is still going to go to DOJ, and they're going to say whether or not they think you're a real citizen. Okay, so this is a vote that is going to impact rural communities. It is going to impact Indigenous people. It is going to impact people in states and cities and areas where there is not ready, available transportation and access to areas to be able to register in person. It's going to impact people who are more transient than others. If you tend to live in different apartments and condos instead of a home, every time you move, you're going to have to go change that voter registration. That's another appointment you've got to make. Chances are that is more childcare, that is more missing work. You are less likely to care enough to do all of those things or to be able to afford to do all of those things after you have moved. It is going to impact women, primarily those who have changed their names after marriage. It is going to impact people who are over a certain age, whose records are not necessarily available in one click for $8 online. People over a certain age do not have all of their papers. And it's also going to impact anyone who seems like they might be suspicious. And so I got news for you. That's going to be people registered as Democrat. We know that. We know that because that's going to be what they're looking for. So what can you do about it? We knew it was coming in a way, right? I mean, it's not exactly evil geniuses we're dealing with here. They're just trying to make it more difficult to vote. And you're right. For those of you that can take care of yourself now and try to get a passport, I would absolutely do that. I would absolutely do that. Go ahead and get a passport. If it's something you can afford to do, and it's something that you have the time to do, and we're nowhere near an election right now, it could take a while. The sooner you file for that, the better. If your passport is about to be up for renewal, I would absolutely do that. That is a practical step that you can take. If you are someone who, like me, has stuff in a box somewhere that if you desperately had to find it, you could. I'm in Florida. We have a Hurricane Go box. That's the only reason I know where half of my papers are for my family, because we keep it in that Go box in case we have to pick up and leave. And a lot of you on the Gulf Coast know what I mean. Well, this will be a great time before hurricane season starts again for us to find the papers we need, figure out what's missing and fill in those gaps, right? Not just for us, but for our entire family. If you can help senior parents or some of your friends do this, this would be a great time to start this, right? That's defensive things that we can do should this move forward. In the meantime, I know this, you're not going to want to hear this, but we got to hit the phones again. Now, you can hit the phones with your congressperson if you want. Will it help? It can't hurt. Right now, very few people know this is going on. Between the signal war chat and the tanking economy, and Lord knows what else is happening in the clown car right now, right? We're all kind of trapped in this circus hellscape. For obvious reasons, a lot of people don't know what's going on. So if you start calling your congressperson, if you start calling news outlets, that can raise awareness, absolutely, even if you can't change that congressperson's mind. However, something else you can do is start calling senators, governors, and state attorneys. Why? Because they would ultimately be the ones that have to implement this, right? Your state attorneys and your legislators at the state level, your governors, and you can talk about the fact that it's wrong. You can talk about how it might impact you and it's unfair to certain groups. But something else you might want to talk about is how it's going to be expensive, how our state cannot afford millions, if not billions of dollars to have yet another voter verification process. And that you don't think that our state, whatever state you live in, that you don't think your state should answer to Elon Musk. That is a position that even the reddest of red governors can defend, right? So yes, talk about it from your perspective. Speak from your heart about why this upsets you or why you think it's wrong. But I would also say, depending on who you're talking to, mention the economic cost, how it's going to cause a lot of confusion and voter participation to decline, and also how the federal government and Elon Musk should not control the voters in your state, right? So yes, on the 5 calls app, I understand, state AG, governors, local media, absolutely, right? And so you're looking at something called the SAVE Act, easy to remember, ironically named. And is it likely going to pass the House? I mean, if I had to guess, yes, because we don't have the numbers in the House right now. But that doesn't mean that all hope is lost. That just means that we really need to hit the Senate with the same types of arguments. You can't do that. Like, there are Republican moderate senators that will push back on this. Keep in mind, do I think that they are trying to steal elections? Yes. Do I think that they are trying to steal our right to vote? Yes. Is it harder to steal things if there is a spotlight on you? Also, yes. This is something that hasn't gotten nearly enough media attention. No blame. There's so much going on, right? But this is something that we can change. We can create content about this. We can reach out to our local publications, to bloggers, to different activist groups, and talk about this and say what this can do. Do I think this will make it harder for women and college students and others to vote? Absolutely. But even if that's not something you worry about, even if you already have a passport, nobody wants to go to the DMV all the time or wherever to change your voter registration. That's a common sense thing that no one wants to wait in line for hours and hours for your voter registration when you can do it online and just show them your ID when you get there. No one wants to do that. So sometimes instead of talking about the big scary thing, sometimes just relate to people on a human level. So they want to take away our ability to change things online, and we have to show up in person at a DMV or something similar and wait in line for hours every time we want to update our voter registration. That's enough to annoy people. That's enough to get people on your side, right? So sometimes think of the other things instead of the big, it's not fair, the giant numbers of millions. Sometimes making it more relatable makes that argument just as powerful, right? Okay, I know that there is so much that we covered here, and I know not all of it was great news, but let's try to take things on a positive note, right? So Jill, in response to this story, is saying, at Maya DMV, you need an appointment now, and it's weeks out. Oh, gross, Jill. I'm so sorry about that. But yes, that would be part of the issue. That is something that we're all would have to deal with times however many, right? going back to the story we were talking about with the North Carolina race, Kelly Frazier asked point blank, has anyone proven that there's widespread fraud in voting? Overall, the answer is no. Specifically in this North Carolina race, zero. They found zero fraudulent votes so far. So no, facts have no place in this discussion, right? 75 Corvette is saying we got to get on this ASAP. Absolutely. And I'm sorry to give you guys homework. I wish that, everything was nice and calm today and we could have swapped stories and positive anecdotes more about our Saturday experience and our favorite signs that we saw at the protests and online. But unfortunately, we got work to do. And this was something that is extremely important. I do think it targets women. They're getting very bristly when you say that right now. By the way, I just read an interview where someone's like, that's preposterous. And they said, okay, then what do you do if a woman's name on her birth certificate doesn't match her ID? And she says, well, they have credit cards, so I'm sure they can figure it out. Not an answer, man. Not an answer, okay? So, the real federal ID, I think most of the airports are going to start requiring that. That is my understanding. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but just from my understanding. Now, my latest Florida driver's license is a real ID, right? So you might already have something that counts as a real ID. So you could just call and ask or look online if you're not sure. It's not necessarily a whole different ID. That's not what it means. It means that it's an ID that is a newer one that passes certain standards, right? So find out what that real ID is. And for your own benefit, when you're just traveling normally around the country, if that's something that you do to visit people or for business or what have you, go ahead and get one of these. That doesn't hurt, right? And so those are things that you can go ahead and do. So some people are asking what's cheaper, the name change or the passport, real ID. That one, I don't know. Those prices change all the time. We do have passports and stuff. I mean, it is not inexpensive. You have to go someplace like the post office or sometimes like a AAA or something to get specific photos. It's not an inexpensive process. But the good news is that they last for years. They last for years and years. And so if you have a passport, it's not something you're paying that fee all the time. But if you're trying to do it for your whole family, including teenagers that might be over 18, it's not inexpensive, right? Talking about name changes and changing back to your maiden name. There's a process for that, going back to court. If any of you guys remember that, some of you may have changed your name and then your circumstances changed and you changed it back, right? Celebrate you for that. But what is that process? How expensive is it? How long did that take? So taking a step back, looking at this, we've got the defensive stance, which, we need to look at. We need to protect our own votes and the votes of people that are in our community that we care about, right? And we need to be on the offensive as well. So figure out what works for you and what way you can protect your own vote, whether it's a passport, a real ID, gathering all those papers, whatever it is that you think you might need. Pay attention to this story, please. Keep an eye on it. We're going to keep you updated as much as possible, but new things are happening all the time. And then on the offensive, let's start reaching out to our state and federal leaders and saying, this is a problem. It's an inconvenience. It's an expense. It's got a lot of problems with it that I need answers to. When they say, if you get someone that's giving you platitudes, ask them a specific question. I have a different name on my birth certificate than I do on my ID. What do I do about that? That is free. Technically, constitutionally, you're not supposed to charge a poll tax. You're not supposed to have it where if you vote, I understand the idea of laws and the Constitution, so cute, I understand. But technically, you're not supposed to be able to charge a poll tax. You're not supposed to be able to put something in front of someone that they have to pay money of any kind in order to have to vote. Constitutionally, that is the case. We're going to see if people wake up and start filing some lawsuits on this. It might be too early because the bill hasn't passed yet, right? Since it hasn't become law, that might be why we haven't seen lawsuits about this. We have seen a number of different organizations speaking out about it, but we haven't seen lawsuits, right? Okay. I love how so many of you are helping each other through this process of, what to do to reach out to people with downloading what apps, and also literally how do you get a passport? I love that. If there's anything that we can do on this end and provide that information on our website, please let us know. And Sarah, I know that you've been keeping an eye, as per usual. We all love Sarah. She's our chief of staff, and she's been communicating a lot of this stuff with you. Sarah, if you could help me make a note of the most common questions, we can try to do some sort of article and try to put all of that in one place for you, right? So yeah, a lot happening right now, some of it negative. Let's find a way to end on a positive note, right? Good news, you have homework. You're not going to be bored this week. Okay, maybe that one was a little bit weak, but it's the truth. You just when you thought you were out and done smiling and dialing your elected officials, we pull you back in. I know. But you've been doing a really good job at it, and it matters. I think if you don't have your phone calls, right? If you don't have the calls you've all been making to your congresspeople, to your senators about things that matter to you, if that doesn't happen, you don't end up with a Cory Booker speech like what we had with the filibuster earlier last week, right? They are hearing you. They don't always react as quickly. They don't always react the way that we would like them to in that moment. And sometimes some of them disappoint us. All of that is true. But look around. What you're doing is working. It is slowing things down, and it is causing people to rise up. Without you, things like that Cory Booker filibuster don't happen, right? Also, without you, we don't build communities like the one we have here on Political Fixer, but also the communities of the people that came out and participated in the hands-off protests on April 5th. Mark your calendars for the next one, which we believe is April 19th. I've been going to 5050.1 as the web address in order to get events from around the country. And I've also been enjoying all of you that are on Blue Sky and other platforms that have been sharing your favorite signs and your favorite moments, right? User 827 is saying, what if birth certificate and passport have different names, maiden versus married? What I would recommend, we don't know the answer to that. Let's just be clear. No one has given us a process, but let's try to use common sense when they have none. And I would try to put your hands on a marriage certificate. Even if you've divorced, get that marriage certificate. Usually in the county where you were married, they can send it to you. It can sometimes take a few weeks. It can sometimes be something that you have to pay money for. But even if you don't live in that county anymore, a lot of times you can still get a marriage certificate, right? So that's a great question. Another thing, Cynthia Fontaine is asking, am I going to join Skylight? Yes, I am joining Skylight. As I understand it, there's 150,000 users on it already. It is the next video platform. That's a great question, Cynthia, and Mark Cuban is backing it. This is something that is supposed to be a companion to YouTube and TikTok. So yes, starting next week, we will be posting videos on Skylight as well. So we've already got our, it uses your Blue Sky handle. So you'll be able to find me on Political Fixer there as well. And so yes, I will be joining you on Skylight. So if you're not sick of me already, you will be soon enough because I'll be on Skylight. Great question there. So Cynthia, definitely make sure that we connect there. Jackie's already on Skylight, says that she really likes it. That's great. I really like Blue Sky. It's hard for me because I had such a big Twitter engagement and I had curated like this perfect blend of politics news and football and basketball and then like Muppets trivia. It was like great for me. But now I feel like all of that is wrecked and I've kind of got to find my people all over again. So if you're not on Blue Sky yet, please join me and give me stuff besides just politics to follow because I get enough politics on Blue Sky. I think I get a lot of information there. It's really great, but I'm missing that pop culture sarcastic vibe that my people on Twitter used to have, that snark and those jokes. And so if any of you can lend your flavor to my Blue Sky account, that would be really great. Bird is saying I'm on Blue Sky and Skylight. Definitely, if you follow me, Bird, at Political Fixer, I will follow you back. Okay, Texas Leftist is asking, does a simple change of address, is it reason to have to complete your voter ID change, passport change? I do not have my passport with me, so I do not know if it has an address on it or not. The quick thing is before you spend a lot of money, Texas Leftist, then I would start calling people and asking them what the process is, right? So like, if you know that there's something that's a weak spot, like you don't have any of those things at all, and it's an easy fix and it's not very expensive, go ahead and do that. But I don't want you going out and spending hundreds of dollars when they haven't defined the process yet, right? We don't know what your state is going to do. We don't know what they're going to say. We don't know what they're going to need. One more quick thing on this that I don't think the Senate, I know the House Republicans have not thought through, but I'm wondering if the Senate has done the math on this. When you start ruling out rural voters who change their names to their husbands that don't usually travel globally, so they have no need for a passport, we know the math on this. This is going to impact as many, if not more, Republican voters as it is Democratic voters. This is not a Republican or a Democratic problem. It actually is probably, by the numbers, more of a Republican problem. This is not something that just impacts us. And so I'm hoping that some senator with a red dot next to their name does some math and says, wait a second, how many of my constituents who voted for me do not have a passport, took their husband's name when they got married, and do not live in a city? The answer is most of them. So, maybe if you have a red senator or a red governor, maybe remind them of that, right? Like, sometimes do the right thing is not the strongest argument, though we wish that were the case, right? 75 Corvette brings up that it's a poor versus not so poor versus middle class issue 100%. 100%. And I could say that as someone who grew up extremely paycheck to paycheck, like lights weren't always able to be kept on kind of thing, right? Very proud of how hard my parents work, and they worked their way up to be able to go from poverty to middle class. But I remember those days. I was the oldest, and the idea of having a spare $100 or $200, laughable. There was no scenario that we would have been able to go get that passport. None. Right? So this absolutely discriminates against those who are poor more than anyone. When you're talking about like you're marginally poor, they're the ones that typically have jobs that they do not have paid vacation. The hours are set. And so going to the offices to do that stuff during business hours it sounds just as impossible as go to the moon. And if you have children or you have a parent that you're taking care of medically, like all of these things, right? Then you might as well ask them to go to Mars to get this done. But to take off half a day of work and go sit down in a DMV to vote, are you kidding me? Like you're weighing that half a day of wages versus voting for the next person that you probably think is an idiot, right? Like that's a big ask. And so I do think that this is an attack on not just the poor, but also the working class, right? There's a lot of problems, but just Nikki said there's no address on the passport. Thank you for verifying that for me, Nikki. I wanted to make sure I didn't give inaccurate information. My recollection was there wasn't, but I just wanted to make sure. So if you have a passport and your address changes, you're fine. As far as your ID, you probably would have to get your ID changed. But again, let's wait and see what the rules are, unless it's something you can do easily, right? Okay. A lot of stuff here. But let's make sure that we end on a positive note. I know I kept you a little bit late. This was a long episode. There's a lot happening. They're taxing the penguins, guys. There's just so much happening. So let's center on something positive. First of all, we had over 81,000 likes on a Tuesday with some pretty dreary news. And, if as long as our likes don't go down like our 401ks, that is something. What that tells me is you guys are engaged and that hopefully you found this to be a good use of time. Something that I found that was an even more important number, and I don't have a data point for it, but how many of you I'm watching on both the comments on YouTube as well as on TikTok, how many of you are helping and communicating with each other? So one of my favorite things about having this time with you is not just the comments that you say to me, but the comments that you are doing with each other, the back and forth, the supporting each other, providing the answers. Sometimes I'll see one of you saying, oh, I just followed you. Oh, I just saw that. Or congratulations on this, right? I love watching that. I love that we have this place with each other, that even when times we feel like we've been thrown in through the looking glass into Alice's Wonderland, at least we're not traveling and talking to the smoking caterpillar by ourselves, right? We're we're not sitting there looking at Tweedledum and looking at Tweedledummer and looking around and wondering if anybody else sees what we see, right? This is something that I am particularly grateful for, that it reminded me when I saw the hands-off protests that we're not in this alone, and we have this weekly reminder that we are in this together. Now, speaking of weekly reminders, next Tuesday, I'm going to try to do a Political Fixer Live, but I'm on the road. I've got some meetings out of state. I'll be taking those on the road. If I have reliable connection, I will do my best to join you. But if you log on Tuesday and I'm not here, do not fret. Do not call Sarah. Do not call an immigration attorney. Though we all know that when they start deporting U.S. citizens, I'm high on that list. We all know this. But it's not anything terrible. It's all positive. I just might not have reliable connection to stream to all of you. I'll try to record a message if nothing else. But we're going to try. We're going to try to do Political Fixer Live next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. And if you missed this or any other episodes, then you can catch them on YouTube on the channel Political Fixer, right? Thank you to GF for saying, your thank you is definitely appreciated. I'm so glad you thought it was a great show. I see you guys chit-chatting back and forth. My question to you all is, not necessarily do you feel better about things. This was a rough night. We had a lot of negative stories, but at least do you feel like you're part of a community? That would be my question that I would pose for you tonight. Are you starting to feel like this is a space for you to connect with each other, to connect with me, to get real answers to some crazy problems and situations? We try to bring you information that we think is important and that's useful, but also I want you to feel like you have, this space with each other, right? So I see Marlene, I see Vivian, so many other people here, right? This is what it's all about, right? I really appreciate the fact that we have this time that we could say, okay, checking in. How are we all doing, folks? So we've covered a lot of ground. We've got some other things that we'll be bringing to you in the coming weeks in ways that you can get involved, not just with calling your Congress people, but some other tools we're putting together. Some of you have been helping us behind the scenes on that, and we really appreciate you. You're going to be hearing a lot more about some other ways that we can all do something and cause some good trouble together. Texas Leftist is saying, join a local organization, a Democratic club, some other organization you have something in common with. Absolutely, if that is something that you feel comfortable doing. I will say sometimes you go to a meeting and you're like, these are not my people. That's okay. You know what you could do? You could find like 3 or 4 friends and you could say, hey, I was thinking we could get together once every month and maybe go out for coffee or a glass of wine and just talk to each other about politics and headlines and encourage each other right now. Start there. If you have a club or an organization and you want to check it out, love that, would support that. If any of you have access to the interwebs and want to Google Hillsborough County Democratic Club and the chaos demon that our Democratic Club is, then I speak for the trees. When I say not all of them are going to be your people and your flavor, sometimes those are their own little soap opera dramas. And that's okay too. We love family, though family fights, right? So one group that I met with recently, they call themselves the Adorables. They, right after the election in 2016, got together, kind of a knock on Hillary Clinton's deplorables comment. They wanted to be the opposite of deplorables. They wanted to kind of group together after losing the opportunity to have a woman as president and comfort each other and socialize. And so 3 or 4 friends got together and they called themselves the Adorables. Now, fast forward, the meeting that they were kind enough to invite me to be a speaker to, they have a membership of over 120 people. They are looking for more places to expand, to meet, and it's mostly women from all different walks of life, all different spectrums, all different careers, just a very diverse group of people. I don't even know if they're technically a group. They've got a mission statement, they've got a cool name, they've got, kind of a leadership structure, but that's all it started with, was dinner with friends, wine with friends, getting together. So if you don't find something, try to connect with someone in your community. And the reason I'm taking your time, even though I know it's been a long night to do that, is we're going to need that right now. And this is a start, but definitely if you can find some local friends, that's going to matter. And if you do have a group of local friends and you want me to come and visit and talk to you, then please reach out to Sarah or go to politicalfixer.com, because we're going to hit the road soon. And I would love to go to your community or a community near you and do whatever I can to support whatever you're working on. Training, holding a meeting, helping you with a fundraiser, whatever it is. That's one of our surprises that we'll be unveiling in the next few weeks. So if you've got a group like that you're passionate about, no matter how informal, no matter how big or small, please let us know and go to politicalfixer.com, because we'd like to be a small part of it if we can and help you get wherever you're trying to go. On behalf of myself and my Political Fixer team, I hope that you all stay safe. Stop doom scrolling the stock market. It's not going to help. Publish more funny memes that I can use for my own amusement. Let's connect on these different platforms. Hopefully I'll see you next Tuesday at 9 o'clock Eastern. This has been another episode of Political Fixer Live. I'll see you all soon. Good night, everyone.